I'm Howie Lim. This is Money Hacks by the Business Times. According to a 2015 study by the Institute of Mental Health, 1 in 10 people aged 60 and above in Singapore has dementia. By 2030, this number is expected to double to 152,000. Plus, more young people, young Singaporeans in fact, are being affected by issues including memory loss and personality change. What might this mean for you and your money if you're diagnosed with dementia or your loved one is? How can you continue managing your money or help them manage theirs? Welcome to Money Hacks, a podcast series by the Business Times, where we explore useful financial tips to help you on your money managing and wealth growing journey. I'm Howie Lim. And if you have feedback or an idea for a podcast episode, do get in touch. btpodcasts@sph.com.sg. Helping us out today, Helen Shen, Group Head of Products at Singlife. Helen, thanks for your time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, Howie.
So not a pleasant conversation, I suppose, but one that needs to be had, because how can families protect the financial assets of a loved one who's been diagnosed with dementia?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you started off sharing the statistics. That's 1 out of 10 for age 65 and 60. But actually, if you look at those amongst the age of 80 and above, the prevalence is 1 out of 2. And with Singapore going to an aging population, dementia care, it's a huge topic that we really should bring awareness and talk a lot about today. So I'm really happy to be here.
Let's start with how one can protect the financial assets of a loved one. I'll be honest, my mom's 84. She has Parkinson's, not dementia just yet. But the doctor told us, it's an inevitability. So how can I then protect her financial assets from other people and sometimes from myself too, right? Or other family members, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. Whenever I talk about dementia, I always say, get yourself a little squad. I call them the caregiver squad. People who's going to look after you, people who's going to be around you, your day-to-day. But when it comes to their financials, you should also get a financial squad of a little group of people who's going to be there to safeguard your assets. These could look like lawyers or attorneys who can help with some of the documents and making sure that the person's wills and assets are put into place, making sure there's an LPA set up, even when they are, very mentally lucid, to make sure that they've got all that they want to lock down into a document. This little financial squad can sometimes involve your financial advisors, your bankers, people who are very intimate with your financial situations, making sure that, and this obviously includes the caregivers who's going to be with you on a day-to-day. So sometimes we only think about the caregivers who's going to be there day to day to help them with the daily needs, but not to forget that they're also financial caregivers. And these are made up of a large group of people who can help you along the way, and to set them up as early as possible is also very, very important.
What about key legal documents, though, to prepare in advance whilst managing these financial matters for someone with dementia?
Yeah. So there are about 3 or 4 documents that we would highly recommend. Obviously, top of mind, everybody knows, is a will, making sure that you've got the will, you've put in your attentions on the assets to be split. A lasting power of attorney is also very important to make sure that these are either very trusted family members or even social professionals who can make their financial decisions. We also highly recommend a document of all your sort of insurance policies, all of which is going to pay out when you need them, are carefully documented, and making sure that whoever is taking care of this has this on hand, including your CPF nominations. And all of these are critical to make sure that they are prepared ahead of time. So when you have a time of need, the person can really reach out. We have Care Collab, so we've put in partnerships with many of these companies that provide will writing ability, LPA, and we've put together this collab with many of these preferred partners so that when someone is worried or thinking about it, they can go to a one-stop hub on our webpage and look at the various areas that they could be helped with, right? Some of these come with preferential pricing. Some of these come with just resource library that you can just read and get yourself very, very updated to.
And this would ensure that the person with dementia has a say, right? A continuing say in their financial decisions.
Absolutely.
And protect from scammers out there and such.
Oh yeah.
Of course. So let's talk about, say, the financial planning steps that one should take if personally they're at risk of developing dementia in the future.
So first, we always talk about what is the cost when someone has dementia, right? At Singlife, we did a long-term care research. We polled a group of caregivers. These are professional folks who care for someone with dementia or long-term care needs on a daily basis. We're very familiar. We then polled a group of Singaporeans, and we talked about how much do you think it's going to cost on a monthly basis should you need some care? So the group of caregivers were like, oh, it's minimally going to be $3,000 and above, and the costs are escalating as we speak. But the same thing to the average Singaporeans, 57% of them said it's not going to cost nearly as much as $3,000. So you can see the very drastic, disparity, absolutely. And this financial planning is important because the cost is only going to escalate, and it is not a trivial amount of funds. So make sure you set them aside earlier. There are many insurance policies out there. Many companies carry it. The different kind of financial instruments. The government has great aids and help for lower income families. So make sure that these are things that you consider as part of your financial planning. Make sure that you get them early on so that, we're not just looking at them at a much more later stage.
We're speaking with Helen Shen, Singlife, about what to do if your family members have been diagnosed with dementia. What if you think you might get dementia in the future? What are you supposed to do about your money? More with Helen in a moment.
If you've been a fan of the podcast Mark to Market, Wealth BT and Property BT, they are moving to a new listing, BT Correspondence. Look for episodes every Tuesday from October. All the insights and analysis and market trends, property, wealth, and soon mobility too. Powered by the Business Times journalism of Genevieve Kwa, Leslie Yee, Ben Paul, and Darren Wong. Because great reads should be heard. The BT Correspondence channel. Find BT Correspondence wherever you listen to podcasts.
And now, back to Money Hacks from the Business Times.
Helen Shen, Group Head of Products at Singlife. We're speaking about what to do with your money, how to manage your money, what to do about your family members' money. Should they be diagnosed with dementia, or should you be diagnosed with dementia? So we've talked about financial planning steps that one should take. What about the family approach to the subject of financial management with a loved one who is maybe showing early signs of dementia?
Absolutely. So it's super important to really get that conversation going as early as you can. Even though as Asians, sometimes it does feel a little bit more awkward to talk about money.
Yeah.
It's a little bit awkward.
It's beyond awkward, Helen. It's a taboo almost, because, if I bring it up, the older person will feel, you're just talking about my death now, are you? And you're just wanting me to go quickly or something.
Absolutely.
So what do we do, Helen?
Absolutely. And this whole idea of, is she after my money? It's always very sensitive. So we would recommend doing this as early as possible and be very open-minded from both parties, right? To make sure that this is really just planning ahead. This is really coming from the best intention. A lot of these discussions could sometimes also take place, not just privately at home. It almost feels like it should be, but to also consider that this could take place with a third party. So it could be a social worker.
Okay.
It could even be with your healthcare provider, because he or she is able to kind of give a sense of, the time trajectory of decline. What does life look like when dementia sets in? So sometimes it's almost counterintuitive, but to have it with a third party who's very neutral but very, very experienced in this topic could almost break a little bit of that sensitivity in family. But nonetheless, it's really about having that conversation as early as possible, extremely open-minded. And also understand that this is not a one conversation and be done sort of conversation. Things could change over the years. Some folks take a longer time to come to terms with having a conversation like that. It could be a multi-series conversation, but important to, I saw your face. It's painful, having the painful chat multiple times. Yeah, it sometimes could be, yes.
Or at least breaking it up. I see what you're saying. Having that one big conversation is challenging.
Yeah.
So let's maybe break it up, more palatable. Yeah, okay. So earlier we talked about setting up that financial power of attorney, the lasting power of attorney as well. Are there some risks, though, to setting that up for someone with dementia?
Absolutely. When we talk about LPA, it ultimately goes back to what does the LPA do and what does the LPA help it with. So fundamentally, we have to understand it is to help protect you in this case, the person in this case, but it's also protecting their loved ones because you want to avoid that conflicts down the road when things are not put in place. There's obviously risk. There could be risk when some folks have multiple LPAs. So it gets a lot more complicated if there are more than one person involved. And sometimes it could be a very complicated family situation. So in those cases, it can be frictions, it can be disagreement on how it's been handled. At the same time, we also obviously have cases where the agents are over time maybe not making the best financial decisions on your behalf. So again, these are potentially quite rare. We haven't heard a lot of it in the market. This should not deter anyone from going to get LPA, going to get their will set up because it's important to get them as early as possible. It's important to keep them in mind, very early on when they have discoveries around dementia.
Is that expensive to do, though? Setting up the lasting power of attorney, the financial power of attorney, because obviously we need to think about budgeting when it comes to taking care of someone with dementia, long-term care needs, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. It's actually a lot more straightforward than one would actually think. We've partnered quite a few of these agencies who's giving a lot more preferential pricings to our customers to make it easier for them. But the cost is not extremely exorbitant. At the same time, many of these LPAs and wills, they almost have gotten quite agile with the way they're doing things. They've almost gotten standard templatized, wherein unless you have a very complicated or you have a very detailed sort of, unique case. Otherwise, there's quite a lot of template that we can rely on, obviously customization to one's need. But this is important that we recognize that whilst you do need to take a little bit of time to get this done and put in a little bit of funds to get this done, the pros far outweigh the cons in this case. Because if you don't, the cost of just, settling that when someone does go into dementia, the cost of that legal confusion and all of that down the road, it's going to be a lot more.
Right. Let's talk about what's available for families to help them along. Because you can't just hire someone to do it for you. There still needs to be some personal care involved.
Absolutely. We actually partnered AIC and Dementia Singapore, so we curated a resource library. It's a 4-part series. It covers everything that you would think about when you have long-term care needs or dementia care needs. What we're talking about today, financial, is definitely one part of it. There's also the caregiver part of it. But the idea of it was these are simple resource booklets that someone could go into because I understand, right? When we find out a family member potentially has cognitive decline, it is extremely stressful. It is really, really a very, very sensitive topic and a very painful process. And we want to but just to make it a little bit easier to have a resource area that we can look into that gives you some of these very early sort of research that points you in the right direction. And again, the journey is very customized. Every family looks quite different. They have different resources at their disposal as well. But my biggest thing was always go get yourself acquainted with these resources as early as possible. Early onset dementia, we're seeing a little bit more of that as well, where it's more prevalent in younger ages. So it's not just your 70, 80, 90-year-olds. We're seeing that a little bit early as well. So do get yourself familiar with the resources out there, get yourself familiar with the tools, and that's very important.
I wish we had more time though, and I definitely will have my self-checks out. The other day I put my wallet in the freezer Hoping it would freeze my assets. T-shirt in the refrigerator. Helen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Helen Shen, Group Head of Products at Singlife. And don't forget to send us an email if you have feedback or an episode idea, btpodcasts@sph.com.sg. I'm Howie Lim, and this has been Money Hacks from the Business Times.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts. Or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.